satellites. A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.
Satellite Haiku, welcome.
Yeah, how are those closed can headphones? Because you started using those the last couple episodes.
That's because my open move by shocks, which vibrate your bone rather than actually produce like an air frequency, they started bleeding through into my mic, which is a common problem for recording artists. Like you need these closed ones that really block the sound. So I switched these. The thing that I don't like is because the mic's not working, I can't hear my own voice in the loop. So it's like I'm totally muffled, and so I push it off my ear a little bit.
Yeah,
and that way I can at least sound a little more natural. But I can't
so
hear.
You're not getting your own sound in your.
No, it's so
weird.
Annoying, yeah.
Huh.
It's been a problem ever since. I mean, I love these headphones. They're the Sony's. I think they're like version 3 of their.
I bought these old Sonys at one of my old jobs. There was like an internal like bulletin board of people buying and selling inside the company.
Yeah.
And somebody was selling these, so yeah. And so they're they've done way well. I had to get new pads for them. But yeah, because the pads wear out. They kind of your oils of your skin, I guess, and stuff.
Yeah, totally. I've replaced pads, and it's cheap and easy, and it's actually upgrades them really well. The other thing that often breaks is like the spring that keeps them from sliding.
Oh, really?
down.
I haven't had that. Yeah.
I have this pair here, for instance.
Can you fix that? Is that even fixable?
It's just probably.
It's not a replaceable part. It's more like.
I think I just need to jerry-rig.
You have to do like a Milo kind of jerry-rig fix on it.
Exactly. By the way, the term. Do you know where the term jerry-rig?
Yeah, we talked about this once before, but like, say it again.
Well, so there's like a couple of different origins of it, but it has to do with World War II, and the Germans would be called Jerrys by the British.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the Germans did that was psychological warfare is that they would make the bomb that they were dropping, they'd make some of them not go off right away. So they would fall and they'd drive down into the ground.
So it was like a dud. Or seemingly a dud. It was like a fake dud.
Yeah, and my mom and dad used to watch the show on BBC that was about it was a bomb remediation group that would have to dig down into the soil around the bomb, and then they had to carefully, and the engineers that were jerry-rigging these things were basically making like a booby trap. It was a booby trap. So like as you brought like the detonator out, it would bump some wire that would then the whole thing would go off, and you'd kill this engineer who was a bomb expert, and that was like a psychological warfare. And so jerry-rigging originally came from that sort of pejorative use of the term, like they're trying to like make booby traps, right? Like they're our enemy. Yeah. But then it came to I recently read about something called semantic bleaching. Semantic bleaching is where a term originates, and we can talk about this term 6-7 that's going around. The semantic bleaching.
I have an interesting story about 6-7.
I want to hear because you have kids that are in that.
I have kids in that generation. Yeah.
So semantic bleaching is when the original meaning is sort of obscured or washed out, and it becomes just something generic that we use all the time and never think about it. A very, very crude one, a terrible example, which is rated, R, would be the term motherfucker, which originally was used as a pejorative term in slave communities to be the guy who was like sort of forced to impregnate everyone else, was a motherfucker. But then we use it just completely randomly as like a word, a throwaway word now. You know what I mean? But it was like a very specific dark term.
It is interesting how like cuss words in general have become like I have a thing about cuss words a philosophy and a metaphor that I use. Basically, in my family, like cuss words don't bother me, and I think like fuck is kind of one of the most useful and versatile words there is. Obviously, right? Yeah. Like it's. I don't. People might push back on useful, but nobody can push back on how versatile that word "fuck" is, right? And, so I told my kids like, I probably said this before that my metaphor I use for cuss words in my philosophy is that cuss words are like hot sauce. And so you just have to be careful how you use hot sauce. Like hot sauce can make your meal like perfect. Like it can take like a kind of a boring meal and just kind of jazz it up to the right degree. Like hot sauce can be just the thing you need.
Yeah.
But not everybody likes hot sauce. Some people don't like it on anything. They have no tolerance for hot sauce at all.
Right. True. Yeah.
And other people are like, hey, this is not the place. This is not the meal for hot sauce, right? Like you're not going to put hot sauce on your Cheerios, right? Like that would be weird, right? So it's like, you just have to know your audience, know your situation. Do you have a person in the room who has no tolerance for hot sauce? Don't use hot sauce.
I like it. Very helpful.
If you're at somebody's house and the friend there that you normally you two of you use hot sauce all the time, but like and even the dad of the mom or the mom in that family uses hot sauce, but now you're at a family meal, so now is not the time for hot sauce, right? So.
Yep.
So that's my metaphor. But anyway, so it is, but it's interesting. Like motherfucker is the one you use because I remember as a kid, as a teenager, that was like up there with that one and the C word.
Right.
Were like that was when you really were going to the extreme. Like even if you were a person who dropped the F-bomb sometimes, if you went with the MF bomb or the C word, like you were really serious. Like that was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now, but you're right. Like even the MF word is kind of like almost like a throwaway at this point.
And I do remember
things have changed. Yeah.
Like junior year in high school, I switched from the public school to the academy, the prep school that we went to, and I remember that Eddie Murphy had become quite famous for his raw, kind of stage performances, and he kind of desensitized us to it because he would just throw it in.
I think for our generation, he might have been the guy, like one of the people that was most responsible for sort of desensitizing it. Yeah.
Yeah. He just.
What's funny is that Eddie Murphy is like, if you think of him now, like the long sort of view of his career, he's like the family-friendly comic at this point. Like he's done all those like family movies and stuff, right?
I know. When he did
Norbit, wasn't he Norbit?
He was all those. Yeah. He did. What was my kids?
The Nutty Professor, right?
My kids loved those ones. Was it the Nutty? What was the one? Was it the Nutty Professor? I can't remember. Where he basically has a family.
Yeah, and he plays all the parts.
He plays all the parts. Yeah, that's the Nutty Professor.
Yeah, totally. There was somebody was talking about at one point when he was getting his I think his like. They do the honorary Academy Award for like a career. I think he got one of those.
Oh, really?
Right, where he got one for his whole career.
Yeah.
And the person who introduced him, who brought him to the stage for that award, was just talking about those scenes in those movies where he's every part, and just saying like, people who get Oscars, they play Gandhi or whatever, right? But like nobody really has any. Nobody talks about how hard it is to do what Eddie Murphy does.
Right.
Like nobody looks at that scene from The Nutty Professor and goes, that's an Oscar-worthy performance. But like every actor who understands acting looks at that and goes, that is the performance that should get an Oscar. So I thought that was kind of a cool way to introduce him. But I want to tell my 6'7" story.
Oh yeah, let's hear the 6'7".
So on TikTok, at some point in the last couple years, some of the people that come across my feed sometimes, there's these middle school teachers that are pretty funny. There's like this one middle school teacher in my feed who his content is like how my kids roasted me today in the classroom, right? And so he like repeats like whatever their roasts are and how they dissed him, right?
Yeah.
But so there's a few middle school teachers that have kind of funny content there. They talk about what their kids are doing, what their class is doing. And one of these middle school teacher creators was talking about, hey, here's some slang that's coming, right? Like, here's some of the newest slang I'm hearing in the classroom. And he goes with this 6'7" thing. He's like, I don't know what it means. They're saying 6'7", right? And I hadn't heard it yet. My kids hadn't said it. I hadn't heard it anywhere. So I thought that's kind of funny. And I was like, I'm going to start using it at home and see if my kids think it's going to come here eventually. Like it hasn't hit the Bay Area yet, but it's going to at some point. And I think, right? Like I'm going to start using it and maybe my kids will recognize it because they've already heard it. But if they don't, this will be a sweet kind of experiment. I'm gonna start saying 6'7", and they're gonna think I invented this new slang when it arrives. They're like, my dad's been saying that.
That's so funny, man. That's really cute.
So I started saying it like in the car. My son would be telling me his story or whatever. I go 6'7", and he was like, what? And then I just started using it. He'd be like, Dad, stop saying that. What are you saying? What is this 6'7"?
Can I fix your thing ahead of time? So the whole thing about it is, and I'm going to put in the show notes. There's a PhD linguist at UPenn who does an analysis of the entire meme, right? And he goes through like all the potential origins and the meanings and stuff. But basically, it's middle school kids have it's been semantically bleached so that middle school kids don't even know where it came from originally. But they like the fact that boomers and Gen X people don't know what it means and they think it's funny. So the whole trick is you have to get the person to say 6'7".
Okay.
And when they do, you do this thing with your hands.
And
you laugh and you do it with your hands. So if you just drop it, if you just say 6'7", that's not how the meme works. You have to get them to say 6'7".
Well, see, at the beginning they didn't know what it was, it was new, right? Yeah. So I was the first one that my son ever heard saying it, right? Right. And so then it finally came here to their class, and the kids started saying it in the Bay Area.
Oh, they did.
And then he would say it, or he would do it, like he would try to get me to say it, or what, like if somebody on the radio on a podcast like said, oh, it was 6 or 7 times we would blah blah blah. He would go 6, 7, right? Yeah, he'd do the hand thing. Yeah, sure. So and I would go, I know, I invented that one, and he'd be like, so every time it comes up now, I go, oh, you're still using my slang.
That's so good.
So he gets all mad at me, and even with some of the parents here, like there was other parents. I went to pick up my son at a friend's house, at one of his friends' houses, way early in this meme. Mm-hmm. Again, it still hadn't come here, but I had just started saying it, much to the annoyance of my son, because he had never heard it from anyone but me at that point. And so I introduced it to these other parents. I'm like, try this with your kid. Like, just start saying 6, 7.
That's good.
Yeah. So anyway, So there we kind of got it going. Like, we flipped the script on them a little bit by like we were the ones saying it, and they didn't know what it meant. So we were.
When my kids were young, were middle schoolers, we watched a Jim Carrey film that was sort of a horror film called 23.
Yeah, I
Have
remember
you seen
that
23?
one.
Yeah. And he has this thing where he adds numbers up and it always equals 23. Like if he's looking at McDonald's menus and it's like, 11 plus 23, like, and it freaks him out, you know? So then we would always as we would look for where it adds up, and then we would say, 23, like we shout. It's so fun. Yeah. It's fun because you start looking for it, you see it everywhere. Like adds up to, But so, okay, so back to this meme, this guy at UPenn, he's a linguist. He just goes in and he looks for, basically, it's this rapper Skrilla. Yeah. In 2024, released an album. I forget the name of the song, but he mentions in the song 6, 7. I was blipping on the side of the highway, something. And then some kid remixed that song with there's a basketball player who's 6 feet, 7 feet tall, and they remixed all like the highlights of him making like great baskets with that song. And that sort of like was the origin where it took off. And then people sort of who didn't even know where it came from started doing it. There was one kid who actually did this in one sort of TikTok meme where he's doing 6, 7. So then so the kids I think who use it now just think it's funny that adults don't know what it means. It doesn't really mean anything,
My son is like, it is funny, like there are a whole bunch of these words now that they're using. Skibbity.
Oh yeah,
Skibbity, Ohio, Skibbity toilet.
Fire and.
Well, yeah, I mean, fire's been around for a little while, but like just bizarre ones. Skibbity is one that comes to mind, but then also like no cap, bet, right? Like these things, right? And
like a lot of it.
My son,
SMS, what is it called?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if part of it's shorthand, because that is where some slang came from, in the millennial generation.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, T9. Remember T9?
Yeah, well, after T9, but some of that shorthand survived T9, right? But I think some of this language, it's just, I think you're right. You're onto it. It's not just 6-7. A lot of it is designed to just be kind of a little bit annoying to the older generations.
Yeah.
Like slang for younger kids has always been a little annoying to crotchety old people.
Yeah.
But I think in this case, the slang is intentionally almost purpose built to be annoying to older people. Like that's almost the purpose of it. Rather than to be inscrutable to older people, it's actually meant to sort of like trigger a reaction.
Yeah, totally.
Which is kind of funny.
Three media things pop to mind. First is that last Wednesday, South Park basically dedicated the whole arc of the plot to 6-7.
Yeah.
And they incorporate a Peter Thiel character that's
Have you been watching South Park?
Oh my God, yeah, it's so fucking.
Really?
I've never watched it until this year.
I should be watching it. I keep hearing about these episodes and stuff, but South Park's always been brilliant. Like I dipped into it over the years, but I've never been like a religious watcher of South Park. It's just always been one of these things that I kind of dipped into. But some of their episodes are so tightly written and so good.
Yeah.
Like I think one of my all-time favorite episodes of television, not just South Park, is the one where the boys see that the girls have one of those like little foldy paper things that tells the future.
Oh, okay.
You ever you know what I'm talking about? Where they fold it, right? And they tell your fortune with it, right? Give me a color, red, RED. Okay, give me a number. We'll pick one number, 8. Oh wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, and then eventually you'll fold open the flap and it says something. Yeah. So the boys are like, oh my God, the girls can tell the future, right? And so they hatch this plan to steal the future telling device from the girls, and they get Butters to fake his own death, and then join the class as the new girl so he can infiltrate the girls.
Oh, that's smart, yeah.
So they dress him up like a girl after he fakes his death, and then he steals the device. But they push the concept so far, like Butters really does fake his own death. Like he has a funeral and his parents are grieving and all this, right?
Shoot.
So then after they get the future telling device and they've succeeded in their mission, like Butters reappears at his house and like, you know, because the mission's over.
Yeah.
But his parents think he's like this zombie returned from the grave. So they basically chain him up in the basement, and that's how the episode ends. Like he's this scary zombie. Anyway, so it's just like, it's so brilliant. They push it so far, and the way it like ties the way they tie it all up is just such a good episode.
Do you so for me, and I've never watched it really until this year, and I was mainly drawn to it because of that crazy thing where Sherry Redstone was trying to sell, you know, and she paid them $1.5 billion, and then immediately she paid Trump $15 million, you know, for the was it 2020 or something?
Yeah.
And they immediately the next day released the most like kind of damning episode of Donald Trump.
Like with the PSA at the end.
Oh my
with
gosh,
Trump
it's just crazy.
Walking through the desert.
So that's just been fun to watch them kind of in real time. You know, like
I keep hearing about how sharply satirical their stuff is this year. Yeah.
Yeah, like in remember in medieval times, historians will tell us that really people knew, I guess maybe through trial and error, but they knew after centuries that ultimate power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts. And so the court jester played a very important role because he was the only person who was allowed to make fun of the king and the king's proclamations without being killed. Like he was just immune to like the death of, you know, the king. Right. And everyone agreed that like we needed someone to reflect back the king's stupid ideas, like make fun of him in a way that was.
Well, I wonder if even for the king, there seems to be like, I don't know, whenever you hear, this is a weird parallel I'm going to try to draw here, but like people who go see dominatrixes and they get like whipped and spanked and stuff, often those are really powerful people.
Yeah.
Right? And so there might be something even in the king himself that's just like, is missing that humiliation. Like that we almost need that to have some kind of spiritual growth.
Or balance.
And we crave that probably. If you don't have that coming from anywhere, right? You need to go find it at the dominatrix, or you need to have a court jester in the room to kind of like spank you metaphorically.
Right.
maybe.
And remember, he
Like,
did.
so I get how it's useful for the kingdom, but even for the king themselves, it probably is something they crave on some level.
Remember Stormy Daniels' original testimony
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
Trump had a graphic designer make several covers of Time magazine with his face on it, and then he asked her to roll them up and spank him with them.
Yeah.
With the cover, which is so weirdly like it's like a narcissist. Also, like that's like to me.
I just
like,
can't
it's
believe
so
every time
complicated.
there's so many stories about Trump that you just like, how is that guy president?
Yeah.
Remember the whole John Barron thing?
Oh, yeah.
Like he would call people up to promote himself, but he
Yeah.
would pretend he was somebody else.
He's like,
But,
"Have you
the
heard of
people
this
on
guy,
the other
Donald
end of the
Trump?
line
He's
was
in
like,
That's you."
I think this is Trump calling to talk about Trump.
I think Barbara Walters even called him out on it in an interview, and one of his magic powers is like a true psychopath. He can lie to someone's face, and it's somewhere in his consciousness, it's not a lie, but it's,
well, he
you know
can
what I mean?
lie. He can lie to somebody's face about stuff that's happening in front of that person's face, and shamelessly,
shamelessly, and that's one of his sort of superpowers. Anyway, so
right. But I
see.
think that's one of those sort of the worst things he's brought to the country is that just this immunity to shame as a superpower. Like there's so many people that are trying to act like they are immune to shame. You know what I mean? Like maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but like it's almost like, oh, it's cool to be immune to shame. Let's just do that.
I think some of the people that sort of magnetically in this term he's drawn to him are people that have that already. Like I don't know that, for instance, I think Mike Johnson.
Well, I think people when they're in his circle, they get his like shame force field.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like if you are a kind of person who, like I think some of those people might actually have not been immune to shame.
Right.
But now they've been pulled into the orbit of the force field, so they're protected by his immunity somehow.
Like you can see when Mike Johnson is asked, like, "Hey, is it acceptable for the president to repost a video of himself driving an F-16 dumping excrement on protesters?" And you see this like flicker of sort of like, oh my God, like a little bit of an inhale on Mike Johnson's part, like where he knows, and then he just falls right into line and he just answers like he's.
Yeah,
but
I don't even know if that flicker is anything other than like a little bit annoyed at the question.
Right.
I don't think that flicker has anything to do with shame or integrity or anything like that. I think it's just like, I knew they were going to ask this fucking question. These people are fucking annoying. I hate the mainstream media because I knew that they were so predictably going to ask this question. I think that's what's flickering on his face because that guy is a true psychopath.
Okay. And then Kellyanne Conway was the one who invented alternative facts.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, she for someone who as smart as she is, she was able to lie straight through her teeth and not act at all ashamed. It was like so unbelievable. It was actually like a superpower. She really did have the ability to
totally.
Just lie.
I think that, it's one of the sadder things to me to think about. Like my kids are growing up in the era of this kind of politics.
Yeah.
Where like for us, this is such like an anomaly. I don't know. Not anomaly is the wrong word, but a decline anyway. Like a regression into some base awfulness.
Yeah.
That's not to say that. So I guess I want to separate two things. There's like the actual political. I think this is one of the problems, and this is one of the reasons we have Trump, is that if you look at the actual product of politics, like in terms of people's the material conditions of the world, like politicians have completely failed us as a society. Yeah. And it didn't start with Trump. That's been a 50, like what we have now is kind of a 50-year problem. But, like before that, it was Jim Crow and all kinds of awfulness, right? Like, so politicians have failed to create a better world for us. Yeah. And politics has caused more problems, arguably, in some ways than it's solved, possibly. I don't know. But on the surface of it, there's been this kind of, like, just as at a human behavior level, people behaved like respectable human beings, like decent people. and maybe there was some hypocrisy there. Maybe there was just ineptitude, like politicians who were hypocritical and they were self-serving. Maybe in other cases they were just like, there were just too many obstacles and too much complexity, and that they couldn't do what they were hoping to do, and they just kind of failed in good faith. But now we're in an era where just being decent, like Trump is just on a human level, it's just like he has no decency at all. Like he's incapable of behaving like a decent human being. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so that's the era of politics I'm talking about, where it's just like my kids are growing up in this era where, when I read that book, Wild Swans, about Maoist China, there was almost this sort of like not crackdown, but like it became really almost like a flaw to be a decent person. Like if you weren't an asshole, if you weren't like trying to just claw your way through their corrupt system, you were almost seen as like a freak, like somebody who should be outcast. Like you were soft. Like the idea of being kind, of being creative, like all these sort of like anything that you think of as sort of a positive human quality. If you were exhibiting those qualities in Maoist China, those qualities were almost like explicitly denounced as bourgeois, liberal, weakness, whatever. And I think that's almost sort of like what we have now in a way. It's not quite as explicitly denounced, but it's like, it's sort of the opposite is encouraged. Being self-serving, being corrupt, being shameless, being indecent,
and gross,
being aggressive, all of those qualities, if they're not explicitly celebrated, they are implicitly celebrated because of who is winning.
Right, and I do think for instance, like Trump, like he just released George Santos. And basically, like he's basically sending a message to all of us after releasing the January 6th rioters that if you're loyal to him, the law doesn't apply to you.
Yeah.
If you're not loyal to him and he doesn't like you, he's going to weaponize.
I mean, it's an explicit message. I think he literally said, "I pardon him because he votes Republican," or whatever,
something like that. Or he was a supporter of mine. It
wasn't even like a sort of a hidden message at all.
Yeah, or like I think
it was stated outright. Yeah,
he didn't say like I looked at the details of the case and it seems unfair, so I'm whatever. Anyway, so I wanted to go back to. In this South Park episode from last week with the 6-7. No. So do you remember the Ross Douthat interview with Peter Thiel? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when he's talking about the Antichrist?
So weird, yeah. Have you heard his more recent stuff about the Antichrist?
No. Sorry, I kind of don't want to spend too much time, because I do think he's mentally, I think he seems like he's mentally ill to me.
Yeah.
Like
I listened to this guy, so I
shit.
follow this guy, John Gans, a writer, who, kind of public intellectual, I think is a fantastic thinker and writer, and he has a guy he regularly chats with like this, named Max Reed, and they were kind of just their most recent chat was about Silicon Valley, and so they touched on kind of the Antichrist stuff. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so the South Park guys grabbed a hold of that. Peter Thiel is obsessed with the Antichrist thing, and they weave him into the story in such a great way. It's so you got to go back and watch it. I'm not going to give it away to everyone, but it's worth going in because they just are so good at they weave in the 6-7 perfectly, and then they weave in his sort of desire for his Palantir, like to suck data down and to just have basically look at every single aspect of your entire being at all times, and sort of this sort of Sauron overlord, he wants to be, but but after watching that Ross Douthat interview, I thought, it's possible that this guy is mentally ill to some degree. Like I think,
I sort of I thought of Howard Hughes actually.
Yes, exactly.
Just somebody who's if they're not mentally ill, they live in such a kind of an isolated bubble of reality bubble that they just like they don't understand. They you can just kind of be whatever weirdo you want to be inside your own isolated bubble, right?
Right.
Like,
right.
yeah. And you can make that reality whatever you think it might be.
And you can surround yourself with people who
if you're wealthy enough, they'll just agree with whatever. Yeah.
Yep. He could start a group and then like
hire
people.
Who's the other guy? The fox catcher guy, right? The wrestling DuPont dude, remember?
Oh yeah.
They shot the guy that Steve Carell played in the movie.
I really didn't see that movie, but I vaguely remember it because
he built this whole
Yeah. Mm.
And then he would wrestle because he had this, I think partly because he was gay and he got to like just sort of be amongst these athletic, kind of beautiful athletic men in a physical way. But I think also because he had just had this image of himself as a great wrestler.
Yeah.
And so they would sort of let him win, I guess. And
no, you can totally.
But he
imagine,
thought he was winning. You know what I mean?
It's back to that absolute power corrupts. Like, you know that what's the name of when the waxy milk carton? There's like a name for that kind of container. It's called a.
I'm gonna go with waxy milk carton.
But you know what I'm talking about. It's a patented thing, and you break the lip and you can pour the milk. You know. Anyway, there's a guy who is one of the heirs of the grandfather that invented that. He's a billionaire, and he kind of went crazy and murdered his girlfriend in London and just was arrested for it, and he just like chopped her up into pieces, and you're like, I mean, he had access to like whatever mental health resources you could have. He had jets and anything, houses.
But when
all
you're
over
surrounded
the
by yes people who convince you that you don't need any help, you just sort of wonder about cause and effect. Like it's sort of a chicken egg problem, right? Like, does being a weird sociopath, kind of is that drive? Did that sort of like serve him in a way that enabled him to become wealthy? Well, not in his case because it was family wealth. Yeah. But I think in some case, like being a psychopath,
Peter
is
Thiel
actually kind of a key to success.
Yeah, Peter Thiel or Elon Musk have these like the ability to willingness to take tremendous risks that reward them in a way that a normal person might be like, it's so I can't sleep at night because I put so much money.
Right, and they don't have the same, empathy factors and things like that might stop them from doing certain things or whatever, right? But the other, but then on the flip side, you wonder, like, sometimes people like a Howard Hughes, maybe, right? They get to some rarefied place in life, and then either it just sort of like feeds the weird sort of problems that are endemic in that person. Yeah. And it just kind of exacerbates something that's already there. Like maybe that's Peter Thiel or Elon Musk. On the other hand, like something about that rarefied place might just make you into a weird person.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, certainly, certainly the like in some ways, back to that creation model, the Kashmir Shavis have, where like each one of us is simply reporting back what it's like to be that variant from the divine, so like the fact that there's like this diverse, like who knows, like some of us are, it could be a group of us that are traumatized in some way or like have a traumatic event occur. And then each of us has a very particular way that we carry the trauma or let it go, or the way we react to it, or how it inspires us or depletes us, it's such a vast diversity. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to return back to with what you were talking about, like kids. One of the films, 500, what is it? No, I was going to say 500 Years of Solitude, but Idiocracy.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like that one of the things sort of that's overlooked in every sort of critical review of the film is how beautifully he devolved the language.
Yeah.
It's because how with sci-fi you have to like extrapolate into the future where we're going based on where we are today. And I thought that was one of the, other than like the corporate devolution, which I thought was brilliant, but the language, was that
how it was dumbed down.
Yeah, and it started. I felt like I had a girlfriend, like, 25
Because
years
the
ago.
main character would speak like a full sentence, and people would think like, ooh, like they would act like he was a freak, right?
Yeah.
Just because he spoke like a normal, articulate
Yeah.
sentence.
And the whole joke was that he had an IQ of 85. He was
Yeah.
meant to be the most average person.
Like the most average person,
Not
but
dumb,
people
not
thought
smart,
he was
but
a
just-
genius.
Yeah.
And part of it, like, it was almost immediate. Like the first impression people would have of him would be like he would just say something, and they would just be like,
Yeah. And then
dork,
that
or whatever. They were like sort of like called him a nerd or whatever.
the lawyer, his lawyer, like that
Yeah.
guy had just an incredible, like the way they devolved the language, I thought was just
Yeah.
brilliant and also very telling. And it felt like it was almost, like he was able to look into the future. And I feel like with texting, as we say, and with kids living like partially inside of their text threads or on social media, and they're using like LOL or LMFOL, like they use them, it starts to creep into their speech, and then I don't know.
I mean, kids aren't reading now, right? And so like, I mean, I even when I was in high school and college, when I tried to read like Dickens or George Eliot or somebody, Mary Shelley, as compelling as Frankenstein is, like at the time, I remember struggling sometimes just with the language. And this is just like 100-year-old language, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to Shakespeare or something like that, where there's language we don't really even use anymore. But with something like, Victorian literature, we use all that same, like there aren't many words in there we don't use anymore. It's just more Baroque language, and it's like there aren't specific words there aren't that many that have completely faded away. There's not like this old English stuff like in Shakespeare, but yeah, it's interesting because I look at my kids are pretty good readers, my daughter especially, and their vocabularies are really good. But again, not to keep coming back to Trump, but like, think of the adjectives he used. There's like 5 adjectives he ever uses, right?
Bigly.
Yeah, there's like, there's some negative ones he uses, disgusting, right? He uses that one a lot, terrible. And, he uses like 3 adjectives for bad and 3 adjectives for good. And that's pretty much like his whole vocabulary.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a lot of people that it resonates with them. They're like that, the simpleness of all of that, the simplicity of it kind of resonates with some people. Like they connect with it. They identify with it, because I think you're right. We're in an era where where language is kind of dumbed down from what it used to be, for sure. And it seems to be just continually moving in that direction. And you're right. I think Mike Judge probably looked at the trajectory that has already happened and did a really good job of projecting it forward. Yeah.
I remember when MySpace came out, and I was dating a woman who had got a MySpace account. She was a musician, and she said, you should go on there too. So I go on, and I remember complaining. I kind of immediately stopped using it because I was like, people just were saying like, "What up, girl? You the bitch," or something. Like they just wouldn't. And I was like, what happened to like actually, like, if you read like Thomas Jefferson's like letter to some other founding father, like they're so eloquently written and crafted and just like excellent structure and then so I was complaining like that, and my former wife, my ex-wife, her new wife is a linguist, she's an linguistic anthropologist. So I was complaining to her at some family event, and she said, well, I'm a scientist, so we don't really we try not to project judgment on language as it evolves, because language always evolves and it always becomes simpler.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, like the sort of the slang you're talking about, and the sort of the clipped speech and stuff, there is a lot of that is enriching language in a way. It's adding to the language, but then there's a certain full dimensionality of language that has shrunk, for sure. Seems like.
And one thing that she brought up, which I found fascinating, is she pointed out that she would study in any given a back and forth dialogue. She would look at how many units of information were transmitted and received. And she said, like my mom was a linguist as well and studied Bushman. And in Bushman, which is an ancient language, it hasn't evolved and simplified. And so when you change the subject of the sentence, you have to reconjugate every single word in the sentence based on the subject. So like the articles, the adverbs, the adjective, everything has to change based on this one thing in the sentence. And she goes, clearly, like as a language becomes more, we'll call it mature, people they start to throw away the useless things, the things that don't add value. Like in English, we don't have feminine and masculine.
Right, but the utility of language is very much a function of like context where we use language, right? Like, so if our main modes of communication are speech, interpersonal speech, that dictates what's useful or not, right? If your main modes are writing, that dictates what's useful. If your main modes are short writing, short text, right? Like, so like these things are very much tied together.
No, that's true. That's true.
Usefulness is very much tied to the form factor in a way.
Yeah, and if we're 23% of the time living in text threads and social media, like comments, then 23% of our experience will be influenced by that type of language.
Yeah, you can't decouple it from the form factor.
It'll bleed in, it's true.
Yeah.
But it was, so I found that interesting, and it helped me to understand that, like, yes, Thomas Jefferson's letter sounded more eloquent, but if you were to break it down, I don't actually know that someone's done it, but how many like sort of units of information were transmitted and received per sentence or per?
But when I think of units of information, like it makes me think of the concept of connotation, right? Like when you think of all of the ways there might be to say, hot or complicated, right? Like you pick any concept, and there's like English in particular is really interesting because it has borrowed from so many other languages over the years, right? So we have, like, you choose your way to say something. If you have a good vocabulary, you can choose the right connotation. So you might choose this or that synonym, and they're not exact matches, right? They're connotatively different. They suggest slightly different things. And so when you have a concept like units of information, I wonder how nuanced that is, and how subtly, how fine-tuned that is to connotation, right? Like if you use this or that synonym, this or that word for a concept like full, right? Or wet or hot or, again, complicated, or any of these terms, you might use a slightly different, you might say, well, difficult, that's kind of a synonym for complicated. But if you use difficult instead of complicated, or if you use complex instead of complicated, they mean slightly different things, right? So, and so maybe the units of information are the same, whether I use complex or complicated in a thing I send to you. But knowing the difference between those two things and having a sense of why I would use one versus the other might be missing from that metric.
Remember, I forget what year it was, but maybe like 1956, Isak Dinesen wrote published Out of Africa. And Ernest Hemingway won the Nobel Prize for Literature for, I think, The Sun Also Rises, maybe?
I don't think you win a Nobel Prize for a particular book. You win it for your career. You win Pulitzers and things for a book.
Okay, well, maybe it was the Booker Prize. And supposedly, like, she felt like, people felt like she was up there and should have won some prize for that book, and didn't because he won. Anyway, so maybe he had published it that year, and that's what spurred them, right? Anyway, so they said English was Isak Dinesen's. She was Danish. Her fifth language. She learned English it was the fifth language. And so an interviewer was asking her, well, why did you choose to write your novel in English, which is your fifth language? And she said, oh, it's easy because English steals from so many other languages. You just have way more words to play with.
Way more words, exactly, yeah.
And it was such an interesting...
English has an interesting paradoxical nature to it, too, in the sense that partly because it borrows from so many languages, like, it's the hardest language maybe to master, to get all that, to basically grasp all that nuance,
right,
and all the exceptions to all the rules based on whether you're going to use a slightly Germanic way of saying something versus Latin way or whatever, right? And plurals are different depending on the the root, language root of origin, things like that. All this crazy stuff. So it's really hard to master that level of nuance. But you can completely butcher English and still communicate.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It might be the easiest language to learn
At its fundamental
to communicate
root level. Yeah. It's
because you could completely butcher the grammar
true.
and the words, and still people, the other person receiving it kind of knows what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which not sure that's true of other languages so much.
I was at a language school in Guanajuato like 25 years ago, trying to learn Spanish, and there was a guy who was probably like in his 50s, from England. He had like a Cockney accent in English, and he had moved to, I think, Guadalajara, and he was like exporting furniture.
Yeah.
And this guy, like, I was like trying to like so hard to like perfect my grammar and to like speak properly. And this guy, he was like, I'm way too old to learn a new I'm not, old dogs can't learn new tricks. He's like, I just blurt out, as you say, like, he's like, I just blurt out the unconjugated verb, some subject, and a few adjectives, and I kind of use my gestures, and people know what I want. Like,
you can get the syntax wrong, you can get the case wrong, you can get you can get the plural wrong, and people know. Like, you could say, "These bathroom where?" and be like, "Oh, where's the bathroom?"
Totally,
oh, yeah, it's right over there, right?
The other thing I found really interesting, so in my previous corporate job, I worked with a lot of different country affiliates, a lot with Spain and South America. And what I found was, I still don't quite understand, how like if a South African person said, I'll go, let's see, I need to go to the loo. You would know what that means, but you don't use that term. You never say the loo.
Yeah.
But in Spanish, like one of them would translate something from English that we had made a marketing piece, and the other, like, South Americans would be like, "Oh, we can't use that. That doesn't make," and like we'd have to retranslate the entire thing, and I'd be like, "What the fuck?" Like, I don't quite, because in English that doesn't happen. Like, we just don't. Canadians and South Africans.
Like, it's strange, right? It's an interesting paradox about English. It might be the easiest language to learn, but the hardest language to master.
Yeah, like people in the south of India speak English, and the people in South Africa and Canada, and they can all understand each other, and there's no like real loss of, there's no like, whereas like in Spanish, I was like, how could that be? Like, what, and I asked my wife, and she was like, well, like, I looked at the difference between the cervical cancer, like, kind of thing that we've translated, and it was true that there was like, most of the sentence were rewritten. And you've seen, I don't know if you've ever watched a Netflix show and they make a mistake where you put the Spanish translation on, and the people are speaking in Castilian Spanish, and then they have the Latin American one, and it's completely different. Like, they just don't even have the same vocabulary. And you're like, weird. It's so strange how far off it is,
Yeah. Like, dialects can be like so different that it's basically a different language.
Yeah. It's true. The other interesting thing I find is, like, one of the hardest things like, for instance, my wife will watch these 3 comedians from Medellin who are young, and they're obviously very funny. She laughs and laughs. I cannot understand a single word they say or a single joke. I just, because they're all slang. It's all slang. It's all like regional dialect. They're using like, they're even making fun of the way they say things, and I can't barely hear.
Oh man, wordplay in a different language.
Brutal, man. And anyway, so we're
I'm always amazed when somebody, like, once in a while there'll be like a poem, like a satirical comical song or something.
Yeah.
Where the rhyming is important to the comedy of it.
Yeah.
And once in a while you'll hear one of those translated where they manage to translate it and still capture the rhyme, still like make it rhyme and stuff. I'm always so impressed by that.
That is actually just really, really impressive. There's a Robert Bly is actually famous for, is it Robert Bly? Famous for translating like Pablo Neruda's poems from Spanish into English.
Yeah, I think it is Robert Bly.
And when I read them in both, I'm always like, damn, like, you have to be a poet to write it in English, because as you say, like, there's so many ways to say it.
I'm reading this book right now by a Japanese author named Yoko Tawada, and I just started it, but I looked at the blurb, and the little blurbs from like reviews or whatever that they trimmed. One of them from, I think it was the New York Times, the guy was like, the thing that the thing that most it said something. The gist of it was just basically like the thing I loved about this book is how the words really jumped off, like the her use of language, and I was like, bro, it's written in Japanese, like you're crediting the writer, but I mean, you should at least give the translator like a little bit of a throw the bone at the she was like, I was like, you don't know any of the language that she used because you read the translation by this other person. So maybe it's
what
the
that
same.
That makes me think of who is the writer, the famous American author that did World According
Anyway,
to
I got a
Garp
little
and
mad
Cider.
on behalf of the translator. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go
I
ahead. Sorry, what were you saying?
totally.
Who was the author? What?
But it made me think of, how like books and films, like you typically prefer the novel, and then like the film can either like approach the power of the novel or maybe like fall short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I felt like, who's the author that did Cider House Rules and The World According to Garp? And
John Irving. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like, people might love our listeners might love John Irving, but I feel like when I would read his stuff and watch the films that different directors made, I feel like he did that classic faux pas in creative writing of, how they say show, don't tell.
Yeah.
I feel like he would just tell everything. Like he just couldn't.
I think
couldn't
Stephen
possibly
King does that too. Like Stephen King writes his scenes as if he were writing the stage directions for the cameraman, like the notes for the cameraman and the crew and the actors to hit their marks and stuff.
Yeah.
That's how Stephen King writes, and so like I can't read Stephen King, but I love his stories. Like
the stories are exciting and really imaginative.
And the shorter ones, like it's almost like, oh, if he writes one and it's 180 pages long, like I can read that because it's like, oh, somebody actually made him edit it.
Yeah,
I don't know. The last one I read from his, they made it into a movie, a TV movie, or I think a limited series with Jason Bateman. And I can't remember what the name of it was. It's pretty recent.
Okay.
And same thing. I actually went and I read it because it sounded like an interesting idea. Oh man, it was so brutal. And he's an example. Just like I agree with you about John Irving, I guess is what I'm saying. Stephen King is another one for the exact same reason. I prefer the movies and the TV adaptations to the books because he overwrites every paragraph.
Well, the other thing that struck me, because I saw The World According to Garp first, then I read it, then I watched the movie again twice.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, and we'll have to.
I mean, it's such an amazing film.
Yeah, we'll have to look up who was the director. Yeah. Was it Peter? Anyway, we'll look up who it was and put it in the notes. But I think what I remember thinking was, how like you're taught in creative writing class, like to foreshadow things or to like plant the seed of an idea and then let it evolve and it ripen. I think John Irving missed like 29 opportunities and then the person who wrote the script was like, God damn it. Like the undertowed and they just built it.
It's kind of fascinating. Way. Yeah. There's certain, I agree with you about John Irving. I love his stories, but his writing I have that exact problem with it. I think his characters are great, the situations are great, and then somehow like because the movie or the adaptation can take the characters and the situation, and find the essence better than he can. I think.
What it makes me think of is when I was out of school at NYU and I was looking for a job, I didn't know what I wanted to be, and I was interested in music production and writing songs, and there was one job that I applied for where I would have been the assistant to a woman that wrote jingles. And I sat with her, for an interview for like an hour. And I remember asking her like, so are you, what do you write on? And she goes, I write on the piano. She goes, but I play like a writer. I don't play like a session musician. Like I can't play, like, in other words, like she could write a song, but she couldn't perform it live beautifully. And I remember thinking, that's maybe what John Irving is. Like he's great at writing the idea, but he can't actually play can't create literature the way like a person who has a talent to make a performance, like to play the cello or something. He struggles with the performance of writing, but he's great at coming up with the concepts and the ideas and the characters. So that made me think of it because it hadn't occurred to me. Like I can't, for instance, sight read.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that I'm like I can write songs and I can play my songs. and I think I have a particular style, but I wouldn't say that like I can't perform a song that I can write. You know what I mean? You know, that's what was weird to me. It was like to hear someone who's like, I can write a song, but I just can't perform it.
I can't perform it.
So I should give it to someone else and they perform it. And it's like, that's fascinating.
I mean, it makes me think of there's like screenwriters and stuff that, you know, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. Are there any other books where you like, or writers that you tend to like the adaptations better that you can think of? Because I saw this, somebody asked this on some social media like maybe a year ago that I saw. It was like it was a pretty interesting thread. It was just people, you know, kind of naming the thing where they liked the adaptation better than the book. There's only been a few in my mind, but I agree with you about Stephen King and John Irving. Another one that that I've mentioned over the years is The Hours by Michael Cunningham.
Okay.
Because I forget who the screenwriter was, but he's actually a playwright, and he just made that book so much better. Another one really recently is Station 11.
Oh my goodness.
Which I thought was an incredible series on HBO.
I haven't read those, but I have seen that. I loved it.
And what's interesting is the book, I actually really like her as a writer, Emily St. Mandel. But you know, remember in the beginning of that story, basically the pandemic happens like really quickly.
Yeah.
And that girl ends up with the two brothers in their apartment, right?
Yeah.
The 12-year-old girl or 9-year-old, I think she's 9.
Yeah.
And then they're there for a while, and then they leave and they go and they find this like cabin and they're there, and then they get separated, right? Mm-hmm. And that becomes like a very kind of big dramatic hook for the film, for the series, where it's like what she's trying to find, like you're sort of hoping they find each other again, right?
Yeah.
Like you're pulled into their connection to each other, and you want them to find. In the book, she moves in with the two brothers, and then basically that's not any part of the story ever again. The idea that they have a connection is completely abandoned. There's no connection between the two of them beyond the first chapter.
Huh. Like which
is interesting.
Does she separate
from them?
So
as a writerly choice, as a story choice, like the idea that you want them as a reader or a viewer, that you want them to sort of find each other somehow in this new wasteland of humanity. You're hoping that they're both okay, and it would be amazing if they actually found each other again. Mm-hmm. That's just not even a consideration of the novel. Wow. Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like that's a major choice difference.
Yeah.
Usually the choices an adaptation makes are more subtle than that. But that was a sort of a major shift, a major difference between the two. I thought that was a much better choice, like a very compelling story choice for the adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I should go back and read those, because I've only seen the series, and I just loved it. I thought it was so haunting and just really
No, I think there's a number of things they do better in the series than the book. Yeah.
I can't
But I think she was involved in the writing of the series. So, like she may have been involved in revisiting some of those ideas and thinking, this would be better if I did this or whatever. Yeah.
I've never read his work, and I actually never watched Game of Thrones until the very last episode. Like it was one of those sort of like things that had like a black hole, had a lot of like gravity, and I didn't want to get too close and get sucked in, because it seemed like thousands of hours of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I could tell that it was like a cult thing. And anyway, so I didn't get into it. But the guy who wrote those was like, wasn't
George
he like
R. R. Martin? Yeah.
Integrally involved in the sort of the showrunner plot arc?
Yeah, yeah.
And didn't he talk? I've seen videos where
then he
talks,
didn't finish the book. Like he was only on book 3.
Yeah.
So so the writers were waiting for him to finish I think he was planning 5 books.
Wow.
And they're waiting for him to finish the next one so they could do but then he just wasn't delivering, so they decided to continue the series without his help.
Wow.
I think they used him as a consultant a little bit.
Yeah, like what?
But it completely, people talk about that, how it tapered, how it just declined.
Is that what
after season 5?
I did not know that backstory.
And and they say, well, it's because George Martin didn't have like the rest of the story written, and these two guys, the two Davids, had to kind of figure out some shit, and they just failed
Oh, okay.
I don't know if success was even possible,
Right.
but like there are things that were seeds that were planted that were like that seemingly really important plot developed things that were developed about like I don't know, Jon Snow. There's the Targaryen family, and the whole idea is the Targaryens are going to be on the throne again, and he's like revealed in like season 4 to be a Targaryen,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But then that's like a huge reveal, and then like that had nothing to do with the ending of the show at all, right?
Totally,
Things
right.
like that.
Yeah.
And so there were sort of some major things that were just like, what? Like, why? How is that just forgotten? You know what I mean? So,
It's true.
and there's this weird split, like people who like me who are really bothered by what the balls that were dropped in the ending of the way that show, the last 2 seasons of it just flailed and failed in my mind. It was just so disappointing because I was invested in it, and I thought this is a brilliant show, and they've woven this beautiful tapestry, and then it was just like they just shat on it
Well,
for the last 2 seasons.
yeah.
And then there's, but if you're one of these people like me who says that, there's a whole other audience that's like, shut up, man. It was great. It was cool. There was battles and shit, right? Like, like they just think like anybody who expresses the sentiment I just expressed as some kind of weird like snob, sci-fi geek snob or whatever. I go back to like Tony Gilroy again, right? And he was talking about on Mark Maron. He was talking about Mark Maron kind of asked him like, what makes the context of the question was sometimes Tony Gilroy has been brought in to fix a script,
Good.
right? And not many times, but so Mark Maron has asked him like, what are things that you find that are just wrong with the script that you need to fix? Like what mistakes do writers make that need to be fixed? Where you get brought in. And he was like, oh, no, usual stuff. And he didn't do a great job of answering the question, but one of the little details he said was, like if a character's IQ like changes dramatically between scenes. And that's exactly the kind of detail a writer would notice. It's like, that character would never do that. They're way smarter than that, right? Or that character would never do that. They're not smart enough to know that. Like, they wouldn't even think of that, right? Like, you have to be a good writer to know how to keep a character's IQ consistent.
Wow.
And that was exactly the kind of thing of Game of Thrones. It was like there was a certain baseline that was built. And so if you are a person who like pays attention to detail, and then you just watch all those details get totally abandoned and characters become suddenly smarter than they ever were in 5 seasons, or it's just stuff like that. Like, it makes me mad.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, if I say that, people are like, you're such a snob. It was fine. The show was fine.
I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I burned my way through Black Rabbit, which is the Netflix with Jude Law and Jason Bateman.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
It's a Jason Bateman. He produced it, and I think he directs a couple of episodes, and then he has a lot of guest directors. Laura Linney does one, but it's one of it's similar to Game of Thrones, in which I've never been in a writer's room, and I've never tried to manage like a series or even a short film. Yeah. But if I had to do it, I'd have to have a war room with, there's probably, you're tracking 23 characters, and there's a plot like 12 plot arcs that kind of circle back around, and they go back in time. They do like flashbacks. They come pop forward. It's so complicated. And they probably, out of 150 different twists or plot elements, they probably made like one error. There's one place where they sort of introduce a character in the flashback, and then he acts completely differently and doesn't really it's like almost like, why did he need to be in the past? It doesn't, because he doesn't have any impact on the future in the same way. And so, but I remember thinking it was a dizzying array of plot lines, character development, flashback forward thing. It just mind-boggling. And
for somebody to juggle all that.
Even as just a viewer, I almost needed to take notes. It was so complicated, but it all worked. It made sense, and they would come together in these. I also felt like the visual vocabulary of the cinematography, they always shot through translucent things. So like it was at a bar. So they would go back,
Yeah.
they'd shoot, the long shot would be through the side of a bottle or through a window that's from one room to another that has a little bit of, like it had this, they used that device constantly.
Like that motif was used throughout.
Yeah, constantly. And the other
I
thing,
introduced my kids to the word motif on the way to school this morning. Yeah.
That's motif. That's good. Yeah,
anyway.
motif. Yeah, no. So anyway, that's a great word to know actually for music and for writing. You know, but so I highly recommend Black Rabbit if you want to dive in. Yeah,
cool.
It's really really well done. And
I rarely watch TV. We've talked about this. My wife has like a way of watching TV that I just like. I don't. You know, like she watches it. She looks for something to watch. She comes home, she turns on the TV and looks for something to watch, right?
Right.
Whereas I'm the complete opposite. Like I have a show that I'm watching, and when I have a chance to watch it, I'll watch that show.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But so like Black Rabbit would be an example. Like, oh, I want to watch Black Rabbit, but like she's already watching like Murder Show XYZ or whatever. Like
right.
The Voice. You know, she likes to watch TV as her way of unwinding.
Yeah.
But then it stays on and I go do something else.
Right.
So like I'm home right now. I could watch something, but I try not to watch TV while I'm just, the unemployed guy.
Totally. No. I totally get it. Hey, I know we're at time, but I did want to say, I saw a job this morning that popped up for me because I never get these. There's no mechanism to sort of grab that I want to do videography and filmmaking. And then like in those social media, like in LinkedIn, there's no way to like reconcile that with my past, with my, so that's, you had mentioned like the same thing, like having a lack of product design, like recent product design, but you wouldn't mind going back to do it because you liked it, right?
Yeah.
That's where I am too. So anyway, so it popped up and there's this company in town called Mr. Car Wash.
Okay.
And there's actually like they had an IPO. It's $1 billion company. They've got like 5,000 car washes across the world and stuff. And their headquarters is in Tucson, and it's actually right downtown. And they have two gorgeous antique buildings that are brick. And I've always sort of like had like building lust, like looking at their buildings because they're so beautiful. But a friend of mine worked for them as a graphic designer, and I looked at the job, and it's basically I would be perfect for the job. Except that it's for internal training, and
making internal training videos,
corporate training, and then corporate, when an executive wants to make an announcement.
It's the kind of thing like if you were 32, you'd be like, oh, cool, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
But there's something about being 57 and being like, I just can't bring myself to do that at this point in my life.
Or to be excited about it, and I know that. Immediately what would happen
like all the things that you might learn on that job, like at 32 you'd be like, oh yeah, it's not like my dream job, but like I'll definitely learn some stuff, right? Like cool. But like when you kind of project now and like what would I learn there, what would I how would I grow, and you'd be like, I wouldn't.
Right.
I would just do the job.
Okay, so then the other side is a very close family friend who's a teacher at a high school, a charter school, asked me to come in. He's teaching a drawing and painting class, and he wanted to have professional photos taken that are Rembrandt lighting for the kids to do their self-portrait. So he asked me, would I volunteer to come in and just show them Rembrandt lighting and then take their photos, and talk about So it was really fun. Like I went in to set up 3-point lighting with like a hair light or rim light, and then I had like something splash on the background and a key light, and then like a neg fill. And we brought up Rembrandt's self-portrait, and we looked at like the triangle under the shadow side, and we talked about the idea of like taking a 2-dimensional plane and then trying to create that illusion that it's 3-dimensional by having a shadow side, modeling the light. And it was fun. It was really fun to like explain what we were doing. They were excited. They were really engaged. And I thought like, I actually wouldn't mind teaching. I wouldn't mind teaching.
Yeah. I think about that too, but it's one of those things. It's like when I've looked into it, there've been a handful of things, and teaching's one of them, where I was like, oh, maybe I could do teaching. And then in California, it's like, oh, it's like 3 years before you can start teaching, because you have to do all these like, you have to get these certifications, and like maybe I could find a job at some weird alternative school or something. But there's something about living in a state that has 46 million people or whatever we have. It's like, they have these funnels that you have to go through to get to be a thing.
Sure, yeah.
So I should go back to that maybe though. But I have a friend who's a teacher at a community college. He has a law degree, but he teaches something completely different. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I wouldn't mind. I think I've often thought I'd be a pretty good teacher. I would enjoy teaching.
Yeah.
I've been a teacher at different times. I taught ceramics in college at an art center to kids. And then here in the Bay Area, in the early days of the internet, I taught a user experience design class.
Oh, no way.
For 2 semesters at one of the local community colleges.
And you enjoyed it, and it was fun.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. So that's just kind of a side note. I thought, first world problems. I have one.
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay, my first world problem is I'm making a painting. I have a painting commission, and so I'm trying to use my woodworking equipment. Mm-hmm. And I basically have, do you know what a job site saw is? It's like a table saw that you can bring to the job site. Mm-hmm. And I'm just always been frustrated with how inaccurate it is, and how it's hard to make really straight cuts and so I watched a bunch of videos where they were like, oh, well, because a fine carpenter who makes furniture, they buy a cabinetry saw.
Right.
That's much more expensive and heavier and bigger. And you're trying to use this little toy, basically. That's the problem. So that's my first world problem. Is just that
I wonder if you could rig it by attaching it to something or building a housing for it.
I've got 5 or 6 different little fixes that people have come up with, how to add to the fence, and then you put a little thing on each end of this fence addition to hold the wood. Because as the wood comes off, you really need a table.
Yeah.
Or else it falls and then it does weird things. You need
but I'm wondering you could mount it in a way, mount the whole saw in a housing that basically emulates a carpentry saw table.
Yeah, my problem is that I am using all of that's my second first world problem, is that my outside little side yard and backyard is my workshop. And so it started, we had sporadic rain coverage, and at 5:15 when I was starting to cut, it started to sprinkle rain, and I had to put everything away, and I was like,
I see, yeah.
So I could either build something, or I can't really afford to rent that kind of thing.
I understand.
I could go to a maker space.
You could have a shed or something like that, but then you need it.
Yeah, and then I could go to a maker space, but then you have to drive there, park, and carry all the shit in, and it's just a pain in the ass, and so you tend not to do it, because if there's a little stumbling block on the way or some little...
That's the definition of a first world problem. That was perfect.
That's perfect. Yeah, what's yours?
Yeah. I got 2. So my wife has an old MacBook Air, and it doesn't seem that old. It works good, but it's the previous chip. It's the last generation they made with the previous chip.
Before the M
chip. She can't upgrade it to the latest OS, right? I think High Sierra is the last one it can do.
Yep, I totally know what you're talking about.
And
Mojave, I think, can do it. You can do Mojave.
I don't know, but whatever. She's on the latest one that it can do. And then none of the browsers, she can't install the latest version of any of the browsers, like Chrome, Firefox, Safari. None of the browsers are up to date. And because none of the browsers are up to date, all these websites don't quite work.
Wow.
But it's not even that old. And it's a fast enough computer, and it almost seems kind of mean to make things on the web. If you just need to use websites.
Yeah.
She can't use her email through a browser because it doesn't work in the browser anymore, and it gives her a message she needs to update. And she's not using a weird, obscure browser. She's just using Chrome, whatever the latest version of Chrome is that she can use on the MacBook. But it's not the latest version, because the latest version requires the latest OS. But it just seems to not be backward compatible for basic web use almost seems mean. If you think all the seniors that I can't afford a new computer, if I'm my mom, right? She's 82. Why would you make her get a new computer so that she can use a website? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's brutal.
Almost seems mean.
It does.
To at least not have that level of backward compatibility for basic shit.
Well, and I wonder if, how you get security updates? for your
Yeah.
OS. I wonder
Yeah.
if they're less secure. Like you were hacked last week.
Maybe.
I'm curious.
but-
I mean, my wife uses Windows 10 and my dad uses Windows 10.
yeah.
And Microsoft announced on like October 16th that they're going to
Yeah.
not support Windows 10 anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know what that means, but my wife is like nervous, and I'm like, you should just
Mm-hmm.
upgrade to Windows 11, because it sounds like if there are hackers and they do
Yeah,
find a
sure.
Windows is going
Right.
to be like, sorry, man, we're not going to patch it. Like, too
Totally,
bad, you know?
totally.
So like,
Yeah.
it could easily.
Yeah, no, I mean, ending the life of things is a common thing in software, but it just feels like, I don't know. There should be a way to just at least install, like you should be able to install the browser on a computer without a chip being different. I don't know.
I mean,
In the OS.
To go
It just
along with
seems
that,
a little
my-
bit, a
this-
little bit of an unreasonable and kind of mean restriction. My other first world problem is my Apple Watch, right? So yesterday I had my Apple Watch charging, and there was like these group chats that I'm attached to because they're the parents of my kids at school. Like I'm in the parents group chat for each of the grades and all this, right? So I'm just like, these chats were on fire all evening, and it was like an annoying level of activity in these chats. And, but I had my phone and my computer elsewhere. I was doing stuff. I just put my computer on Do Not Disturb. My phone's kind of blowing up with the chats. And it ends. 11 o'clock, I go to bed. I get my Apple Watch. I put it on. And I punch in the little password. And and then my watch just starts blowing up with all the chats from 4 hours ago, right?
yeah.
And I'm trying to go to bed. And so I'd like manually force it onto Do Not Disturb, even though it's on bedtime mode already. It's like technically Do Not Disturb already. But I put and then it's just boom, 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 blowing up, just pinging my wrist and vibrating and making whistle noises and shit. I'm trying to go to bed. And I guess because the messages happened before I specifically said Do Not Disturb, like the timestamp on the messages was from hours before. Like my watch was trying to catch me up on 4 hours of bullshit that was happening on my phone that I wasn't even interested in. Anyway, so like for like maybe 20 minutes, my watch just was on fire, blowing up on my wrist, like beep, 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 bzz, 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 woo, woo, bzz. Oh my God, it was so fucking annoying.
That's literally
I felt like a little bit enraged almost at the fact that it was interrupting me that much when I was trying to go to bed.
That's literally the dictionary definition, as you say, of the first world problem. Is a device that
Yeah.
is kind of trying its hardest to catch you up, and you're like angry that it's trying.
I was like, I'm caught up. Like I have other devices that you know what I mean? Like, how is Apple not smart enough to know that these were already read on my other device? Like, fuck off. Anyway,
That's
awesome.
awesome.
That's a
great
problem.
first world problem, man. Nice.
All right, dude.
Let's call it Satellite Haiku. Love it. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, man.
Bye, man. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.